Hello, all you beautiful people out there, and thank you very much, Ma, for that slick and lovely intro. And you are right, we are now on to the Reporter Roundtable. Quick note, I am Callum. I'm a writer and editor at T&W, and today we have four amazing experts here to share with you a whole lot of interesting information. So I can see there on the screen now, and because you've probably already had enough of me prattling and talking on, we're going to go through and each of them is going to introduce who they are and some of their expertise. So to start off, I'll hand over to Angelica for an introduction.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for having me here today. So my name is Angelica Donati. I work in the construction and real estate space. I am the head of business development for Donati SPA, which is an Italian construction firm, as well as the founder and CEO of a development company called Donati Immobiliare Group, which operates internationally. I'm also a PropTech advocate. I am an advisory partner at PropTech VC, at a PropTech VC firm, called Concrete VC. And I write on the topic for Forbes and a series of other columns.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Angelica. Looking forward to hearing from you more in a little bit. Next up, we have Julian.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julian Phillips. I'm Senior Vice President at AVI-SPL. We are a technology company that are in the middle of this huge digital enablement for the workspace. I've not flown anywhere for the last year, but I have spent most of my time in the sort of bridge between the world of technology and the world of real estate and architecture and design. And the one thing that we all should know is that we are headed for some significant changes in the way not only we design the workplace, but how we think about work itself. So this is going to be a really exciting conversation.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Julian. Next up, we have Erik.
Hello, my name is Erik Ubels. I have developed the Edge building for Deloitte about 7-8 years ago. That became quite famous because of its sustainability and technology. Since then, I've been working for a tech company, a real estate developer for 5 years. And since last summer, I'm self-employed, helping customers all over the world building smart buildings with my background in electronics, IT, sensors, and building technology, and trying to make the most out of the smart building for our customers, obviously from a human-centric design perspective.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Erik. And last but definitely not least, we have Matthew.
Thank you very much for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Marson. I'm Sector Director for Manufacturing and Technology at Arcadis, and author of Digital Buildings Bootcamp. Love kind of everything smart buildings, and have been fortunate enough to work on all sorts of silly, crazy, daft projects around the world, including the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco, 22 Bishopsgate, a little bit closer to home, and Neon, if you've seen any of that stuff in the press. And I'm very looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you very much. So for everyone watching, just a quick note, we're going to have of how this conversation is going to work. We are going to have some questions and our experts will discuss amongst themselves. And then at the end, we're going to move to an audience Q&A section. As Mar mentioned, you can do this by commenting on the right-hand side in that little chat function that you can see there, and use @Q&A to make sure one of our lovely elves picks up that question and make sure we can put it to the presenters. So without any further ado, let's just get straight into the Q&A. So the first question I would like to direct towards Angelica. And really it's kind of just about smart buildings and use in general. So the most obvious ones for this sort of tech are kind of corporate and education sectors for pretty obvious reasons. But then I guess our question to you is, where else do you really see the potential for smart buildings to take over and start making a real impact?
Well, in general, I would say broadly across the built environment. But if I need to pinpoint one subsector which you haven't mentioned but which can definitely benefit, it is residential. specifically in the multifamily space. So rental residential can and will, within the limitations, obviously, of privacy concerns and how deep into people's homes you can go, but it will definitely, it is definitely, and it will definitely become smarter in light of all the restrictions and all the scares and worries that we've had with the pandemic.
No, perfect. Thank you very much. So Julian, I think the next question we're going to put towards you, and I think as someone who, has a smart home in the very smallest sense, which is, I have like a Google Home and a couple of connected lights. There's obviously some issues in making that work together, but I think when you get to the corporate or educational, just broader sectors, there's so much more. So kind of wanted to hear from you what you thought some of the main challenges of like integrating all these different smart technologies in a cohesive and seamless way.
Well, I have 37 Alexas in my home. I shouldn't have said that word because it'll the conversation. But I think the whole movement of consumer technology coming into the workspace is something that we should look forward to. I don't actually think the corporate market is yet ready for some of the advances that have been made in the consumer space. But I actually don't think the major problem for the implementation of technology is a technology problem. I do believe we have a significant amount of amazing technology already available, and we've actually been working with this over many years. I think the biggest challenge we face is more of a cultural and an organizational problem. And that's on the basis that those that design buildings and interior design have a very different design principle and set of protocols to those that design and implement technology. And our two worlds have really lived in parallel, but not fully integrated. And I think if we are to realize the full potential that we have for smart building technologies and better work, then we need to figure out how we're going to integrate those two worlds together. The technology is already there. So I hope that this is the kind of conversation that we are having right now that will enable that to happen.
Same. Yeah, that would be fantastic if we can put some of the issues to right. So Erik, it was kind of, I guess, building off something that Julian was saying slightly there about one of the issues of, implementing smart buildings being with its like the cultural aspect. Where do you see the conflict happening between the high level of, smart building functionality and ease of use? Like, how do you go about managing that? And what is there any is that something we need to manage? Is there conflict there that should be dealt with?
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of conflicts there. I mean, every building solution at the moment, whether it's controlling heating or light or building access or ordering coffee or room booking, they all come with their own app. And that's, of course, insane. So imagine you work for a large company and you enter the building and they would basically tell you, please download 21 apps and have fun today and be productive. That's obviously doesn't work. So we need a common app, at least for the majority of the capabilities of a building. So that's one large issue. And the other issue, which I find very interesting, is that at C-level, it turns out that 99% of C-level actually wants to invest in smart buildings, irrelevant if you're a building owner or one of the big tenants. But 49% of them bail out after the first meeting with a consultant. And that's really scary. And that's related to, if you want to do a smart building today, there's not one company that actually provides you all the capabilities and the sensors. So what they come in with, selling you a smart building, they're also telling you you have a huge system integration problem at hand. And I think that's scaring people away. So we definitely have to do better on the integration of all those different sensors with less different gateways, more common technology that needs to happen to make this go forward. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Matthew, this question is towards you. So I guess when we're talking about, actually installing smart systems in buildings, there are probably two main ways of doing it, and that's kind of retrofitting or installing them in new build projects. And I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Like, what are the challenges across those two different methodologies?
Well, retrofit is where the fun is at, and just because you've got an existing building doesn't mean that you can't make it smart. So I think there are probably three things that you should probably do for an existing building. In the first instance, it's to look at what dormant data you have. I wouldn't be surprised that if in your lighting system, your building management system, access control, your Wi-Fi access points, if you are swimming with data that you're probably not using. So firstly, you need to have a go at trying to get some of that data out of there and seeing what you can do with it before you make a decision as to whether or not you're going to supplement with additional sensoring or systems after that. And that will give you a bit of an assessment in terms of almost what level of smart your building's got, which for your context, I think you should put it into a kind of bronze, silver, gold way of doing it. And that will then be able to drive a bit of a gap analysis for you as to what to go buy next to give you the functionality that you want in a targeted way. And one of the kind of joys of having an existing building is that you'll know if there's an improvement, because you'll either see it in the bills, you'll hear the anecdotes, there'll be a better kind of buzz about the space because you've done something to the systems. So that's probably retrofit. And on the new build side, the kind of, it's almost quite difficult, I think, to start with a blank piece of paper. And what I see with clients is their brief is, I want a smart building. And that's kind of as far as it goes. A lot of the early work that I sort of do with them is about working out, well, you know, what kind of functionality have you seen? What makes business sense? What does that look like in terms of affordability? How scary is the problem that Erik was talking about in terms of integration before going from there? In some ways, I would argue that retrofit is a little bit easier.
That's fantastic. That's, yeah, that sounds very interesting. I think you touched on some really intriguing points there. And I would love to, yeah, I'd love to be involved in one of those retrofitting projects and really, you know, see a full building roll out. So after that, we've had some thoughts. So I think what would be good now is if we kind of pull out a little bit and look at the smart buildings as kind of a wider whole. So of course, I think everyone's aware that, you know, there's probably going to be a big change coming in after the pandemic is under control, the vaccines rolled out. And I think it'd be interesting to kind of look from different perspectives of what people want smart buildings to do. So I think I'm going to put this question first to Angelica, and I guess on a fundamental level is, what are property developers looking to smart technology to do in buildings?
Well, I think the long-term issues that developers and then eventually owners and operators will have is to future-proof their buildings, because we're dealing with COVID today. Hopefully we won't be dealing with COVID for that much longer. And during the pandemic, there was a push to rethink the way we live, the way we work. So on the residential side of things, people were moving away from city centers. They were looking for homes with gardens. They wanted a home office. From a commercial, a corporate standpoint, a lot of, as you mentioned when we started this conversation, a lot of companies send their employees homes, and many people, especially people who work in large service-based corporates, haven't been back to the office since. And so there's this whole question around, what will the future of the office be? Will there even be a future for the office? I think there will absolutely be a future for the office. It might be more flexible. There might be a bigger element of remote work baked into all sorts of roles. But the real question that investors need to ask themselves, the developers need to ask themselves, how do we future-proof what we're doing today? Because today's emergency is just that, it's an emergency. So you need to kind of be able to forward predict what change was already coming and was accelerated by the pandemic, and what change is exclusive to the pandemic. So I have a very strong feeling that a lot of the behaviors that we're seeing today will not be baked in for the long term. Although I do strongly feel that it was the push we needed to realize that a lot more flexibility can be introduced and can become structural to our way of working. I cannot believe that the city is dead, and I cannot believe that people who were willing to pay a premium for city center locations will no longer be willing to do so. I think we need to kind of take everything that's happened to date with a pinch of salt and try and future-proof our investments and future-proof our projects.
No, that sounds yeah, supremely sensible, and I do have to agree there will be a shift, but yeah, I can't imagine city centre stuff changing hugely. So the next part of this kind of question I wanted to direct to Erik, you know, about what smart building technology can achieve post-pandemic. And to Erik, I wanted to hear about what he thought from the building owner's perspective. What do they want smart technology to achieve in their properties?
Yeah, I think the good news is that building owners only a couple of years ago couldn't care less. I mean, the energy costs would be paid for by the tenants. Actually, the owners were thinking about the tenants as nuances, trouble people who ask for, good quality air, etc. That is changing a lot. So people now start to realize, obviously, that smart buildings at least are more valuable, have raise a higher rent for them. So that's the good news. On top of it, there's a mandatory or obligation coming into, at least here in Europe or for every country that agrees with the Paris Climate Agreement. So building owners start to realize that they do have to provide a healthy, safe environment that's not only energy efficient, but also helps their tenants to be more productive. And they now even need to help customers to say, hey, you need to hire less or more space instead of just trying to have a 10 or 15-year contract. Obviously, the contracts are shortening very fast. So actually, their building needs to be in demand on an ongoing basis. So I think they're driving it for many different reasons in the good direction, not just energy, but also productivity, health and well-being of people. So that's what's happening. And therefore, obviously, they need smarter buildings than they had, and they have to do a lot in the area of existing buildings to upgrade them. And again, not only on energy efficiency, especially now with COVID, the whole idea about air quality, CO2 levels, all of that stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty happy to see that the demand for happy buildings is no longer driven only by the tenants, but now the real estate developers as well as the owners have an interest. So definitely will happen. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Erik. And the kind of, I guess, the final bit of this, three-pronged question, we've got a slightly expanded one, is going to Matthew. And I've looked at what property developers and building owners are looking for when it comes to smart technology. Now, Matt, would be interested to hear what you think kind of building tenants are looking for. What do they want a smart building to be?
Yeah, exactly. And I tell you what, I have run out of I told you so, the amount of years I've been banging the smart buildings drum. They basically are looking to do the 3 C's. Firstly, compliance. They need some technology that proves that things have been cleaned in the right way, that they followed all the right protocols, and certain actions have been triggered. They then need to think about cost control so that they're able to flex what the building's doing, given that you've got an erratic and perhaps unpredictable population. So if that's turning off lights, HVAC, maybe ramping up HVAC if you want to get more airflow through the building, you need to have that fine-grained control to make it happen. And finally, there's a bit of coerce, like, the office is great, look at all the cool technology that we've got. This is a place that you want to be to continue to spend your time. And that's where the developers should have already invested in the right kind of train track technology in the building. If that's the necessary networks to take the sensors, a platform to do something with the data, or even APIs if they're delivering some kind of a service. And in a report that we'll be releasing later in the year, looking at the cost of a smart building, we think that a tenant probably has to stump up about 4% of the capex for that whole building. And it'd be interesting to see how those sorts of things work in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So those are kind of 3 perspectives from, I guess, the 3 major people that are looking at smart buildings and what they want them to achieve. But I think there's another angle that we should discuss a little bit. I assume you, watcher, are the same as me, where you've been working from home for a long time, and that with it brings some positives, it brings some negatives. But surely the future is going to be more of a hybrid sort of work environment. And this is something I would like to push to Julian and just ask, how then do you manage that a smart building is both useful for when people are there, but also integrated or connected enough that it's also playing a part in people's lives when they decide to spend a couple of days working from home?
We mentioned it right at the beginning of the panel, that we have shifted our attention away from the building being the center of everything to being the person and the employee being the center of everything. And if you listen to what employees are saying and all of the forecasts about what's going to happen, not just in the months as we're returning from COVID, but in a future forward state, is that we are going to be in a hybrid world. Most of the projections are actually showing that people on average are probably going to be wanting to work from home maybe 1, 2, even 3 days a week. And all of the data projections also show that that means that the density of people that we're actually going to have in physical space all at the same time is going to be a very different profile from what we've had before. Now, some of the projections are showing that that means effectively that more people are going to be working remotely than are actually going to be in the physical workspace. However, they're going to be interacting with their colleagues in the physical space. And so it's going to be highly unlikely that there's going to be any collaboration or any meeting that's going to happen in the building that is not going to have remote participants involved in it. And we have to move from technology people, we have to move from just the design principle of the remote folks have to be able to see and hear, to actually move to a position where they need to be seen and be heard. Now think about that for a moment, because that's a fundamental different principle. So we need to move to the democratization of experience for people that are working remotely. And we do not have that today. So when we start talking about smart buildings, it's not just about how do we enable the building itself to know what's going on. And that's increasingly important because we're going to have much more dynamic movement of people in and out of space. We also need to make the technology better to support that remote participation, not just for those that are working from their home, as we're doing right now, and coming in on our cheap webcams and Wi-Fi connections, but also what that experience actually is in space. And so I think that we're going to see a significant reinvestment in technology to improve the overall collaboration experience that reflects the fact that the remote participant needs to be elevated and their voice needs to be elevated in that conversation. So lots to do, but I do believe, as I guess the rest of the panel believe, is that the way that we create sustainable work and experience for all of our employees and our companies is gathering people together again. So I do not believe this is the end of the office, but I do believe we're going to have to reinvent that experience and elevate that experience when people do come in to the office.
No, that makes a perfect amount of sense, to be honest, and I can see that being a huge challenge for those involved in the smart building industry for years to come. So thank you very much to everyone for that talk. I guess building on from some of the points that Julian was making there, Angelica, he kind of mentioned some of the technologies that you'd like in terms of meetings and making sure people are seen and heard. I just kind of wondered what you think other technologies would be, and that we're going to see them, grow and evolve and become more useful. For example, is IoT going to play a bigger role in the smart buildings of the future?
Definitely. I mean, the whole point of smart buildings is to increase connectivity, but also increase the data that the building provides so the building can be run more efficiently. So one aspect that we can't ignore is also efficient remote management of buildings, which is only feasible if you have interconnected sensors, which let you know not just whether your systems are running properly, but also how many people you have in the building at a given moment, when they come in, when they leave, where they are, not just from a tenant experience point of view, so not just from an occupier engagement perspective, but also quite simply from an efficient management perspective, which also then ties into ESGs and the goal to reduce carbon footprint, which is a very strong underlier with smart buildings.
Perfect, thank you very much. And to Erik, I guess again, another kind of expansion of Angelica's point is, what do you see as some of the barriers, to the wider deployment of smart building technology? What's going to stop some of those bits of tech that Angelica was talking about from being actually installed and happening?
Yeah, I think one of the huge challenges is that when people start looking at smart buildings, they see all those different technologies related to the traditional building technology like BMS, HVAC, elevators, building access. That is what I call let's call it the traditional part of which come with the building most of the time. And then you have all these aftermarket IoT capabilities to extend sensoring because you want to meet the well specification or have people counting capabilities. So almost like in a toy store, they see all those different technologies and they want it all. And I think with what Matthew was saying, I'm doing the same thing. I first try to reduce the ambition a little bit, not because they should not be ambitious, but I think they're over ambitious and they want it all. And obviously all of the people selling this stuff promise them, we got APIs, so we can integrate it. Well, yeah, for sure. Well, I've been a CIO of 23 years at Deloitte, and there was only one nightmare, and it was called API. So I mean, we cannot do without the APIs, don't get me wrong, but just the simple fact that they all glue it together, that doesn't make sense. And I think it would be much smarter to, work from what do you want to actually create for your end user? What kind of experience do you want to have? Much like what Matthew was saying, and then derive that back to what does that actually mean for the capabilities on your, your meters, your BMS, your IP backbone, and what kind of sensors do you actually need to make that happen. And then the other.
So are you okay there, Erik?
I don't know. I still hear you. I hope you hear me.
Oh, yeah, I hear you. I hear you absolutely fine. Sorry, but I'm not sure what the interference was there.
Anyway, so what I'm trying to tell them, also make a very conscious decision about the cloud platform you're going to use and the capabilities that company is providing in this smart building industry, because there's a huge difference between the one another and their capabilities. And even start to think about whatever the products you are buying, make sure they actually work with the same or similar cloud environments. Otherwise, you get a pile of cloud solutions that all have their compliance and the privacy and security, etc. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So I would drive this integration up front before you do anything else, and then bring it together and for sure in a digital twin model, which is very badly understood so far. So everybody now sells a digital twin, but there are not a lot of real digital twins out there. But yeah, that's, I think, how we should bring it together. And not just about sensors. That's the other thing I want to say. A lot of people say, we want to buy sensors. No, you need to make sensors, of course, useful, but you can do a lot of things if you derive data in a smart way. Even with occupancy today, which is a big thing for a lot of people. But if you have CO2, if you have noise and light, and you correlate that, you can actually already get to an 85 or 90% accuracy on people in meeting rooms, which you don't need a camera to do that. So there's lots of other ways to use the data in a smart way. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much for that, Erik. So yeah, I would like to thank you, all the panel, for that. And now we're going to move into an audience Q&A section. So I think the first person I'm going to put the question to, this is to Matthew, and the question is from Michael O. To kind of paraphrase what Michael said, was that how do we separate kind of nonsense from reality when it comes to smart buildings? The example they used is, if you just throw a Nest in a residential home, many developers are calling that a smart home, even though really it's just a small computer in a house. What do you think, Matthew, is a way of actually separating what a smart building is and what a building with a bit of tech in it is?
And that's really difficult, and part of the problem why I sort of think the smart buildings world is in a bit of a mess. There are all sorts of claims out there. People will turn up to talk to building owners with their IoT, blockchain, gateway, VR in the cloud, and it's all a bit meaningless. So I think you have to kind of educate yourself and be quite a sophisticated buyer when you start to have those conversations. So knowing what you expect a bunch of foundational tech to be, how it needs to go together, and really what's the output that you're looking for. If you can go answer those things and basically test them on a sort of set of questions. Okay, but how does that link to that? What do I get from that? Show me. Don't believe the buzzwords. You've got to almost be rude to the point when you're asking questions, to a point that you're comfortable that you're buying the right thing. I have fallen foul of that in the past and made some mistakes. So yeah, I would recommend being firm in pushing back on vendors.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes sense. That it's, in a way, it's partially the responsibility of you to define what you want a smart building to be, rather than let other people define it to you. Thank you very much. And cracking on with the audience Q&A, I've got a question for Julian here. It's from Aaron McGroherty. He mentions that the elevator appears to be the black hole of the smart building world. And he was interested in hearing from you what you thought some of the, what can you do with this kind of space to make the building smarter and more efficient for the occupants?
Wow, I didn't expect that question. So we've done some really cool things with elevators as far as experiences is concerned. In other words, you sort of go into the elevator, and by the time you've risen to the top floor of the building, you have this amazing audio-visual experience. So I think there's opportunities to create branding exercises and communication. I also think, you know, we see a massive demand now for digital signage, fully integrated digital signage in the built space now. And I think spaces like elevators are great opportunities. We've already seen it. This is not new, but I think we're going to see more investment in that. The other aspect is around control as well. And, you know, Erik mentioned that universal app for the building. We do believe that mobility and mobile apps are the way forward. And of course, the one device that we all know everyone has is a smartphone. And if you can integrate those services from the building into that interface, then you could have dynamically called elevators based on your location through a beacon sensor, for example, that knows who you are, that will take you directly to the floor that you need to go to. So there's lots of opportunities at every aspect of the building, but back to the points we've been making earlier. You can't do this in silos. You can't just keep building applications and functionality that live in its own stack. You have to do it at a foundational level, as Matt was saying, and really build an ecosystem that is going to work with all different aspects and collate all of that data together. So plenty of opportunities, but be careful not to go down particular rabbit holes and then get locked in.
If you allow me, I would like to add to that question, because it was also about the black hole, the elevator being the black hole. And actually yesterday I had a very good conversation with my friends at ThyssenKrupp, the elevator guys. And this is a huge challenge, because these guys, you know, generically the elevator industry is trying to close down or to keep close on the elevator controllers and the data they provide. But the good news is, even in the Netherlands alone, for example, there are 3 startups who now make, you know, aftermarket sensors that you can glue to the elevator car that do not interfere with the controllers whatsoever. And they are actually able to produce about 90% of the stuff you need to know from an elevator. So there's a way around this industry, let's put it that way. Yeah.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, it kind of sounds, you know, to kind of sum up that little section, is that you need to think of the elevator as an extension of the whole part of the building, and not simply a, you know, a unit in its own right. It needs to work as part of the wider ecosystem. Angelica, this question is going to be for you, and it is from Tanya Houston. So she asks, really where the balance of the successfulness of a smart building is between getting the best system and educating the occupants. So where's the line on that? Is it, you know, is it that you need to make sure that someone is very educated and they can use the building to the, you know, its ultimate use, or does it just need to be seamless to use? Where's the balance there?
Well, I would go for the latter, in the sense that ultimately your occupiers, your users, are not IT experts. Well, unless it's a building that is occupied by IT experts. But we have to think about your average Joe, person like me, who, or like yourself, who just goes to work or goes home or goes shopping or whatever, and just wants things to work. So I would err towards user experience and ease of use, and that's why the point that was made earlier by Erik about the single platform approach is so important, because you're not going to get a good user experience if you have to switch apps to do stuff. I mean, people will just not use the apps at all. So if you can provide a seamless service and an easy to use, intuitive, seamless service, people will just not know how to make the most of it, or will choose other shortcuts.
Cool. Thank you very much. And we've got time for one last quick question before the roundtable ends. And I'll just throw it to Matthew very, very quickly. And it's just that, given it's unclear how much impact COVID will be having in 12 months, let alone 2 or 3 years, how do you manage like social distancing measures in a building?
With great difficulty, because a lot of things are fixed. So what you want to do, I think, is instead work out the sort of contact that folks might have had. So you've probably got a positioning system in your building already in the form of your wireless access points. And knowing which devices, if you can tie those back to a person, have connected to which access point, and then that will give you a kind of sphere of influence of the places that people have been. So if there aren't physical things you can do, but you want to look at the sort of mixing of people, there's a system you've basically got for free in the building that you'll probably be able to pull something from. Otherwise, it would be so specific down to the individual building. That's one for you and your local FM folks to work out.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Matthew. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this section, which is a shame because I was loving those questions and the audience participation, but I'm sure you can find many of our experts on social media if you want to continue this discussion further. So before we move on to our next section, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Matthew, Angelica, Julian, and Erik for that, sharing their expertise and knowledge. And hopefully we'll get to see you soon. But stay tuned because there is some more tasty content for your brain plate coming up right now.